Welcome to Jesus-Centric Leadership. I'm Donna Patton, and I'm here with Pastor Josh, and we have a special guest with us today. We have Brad Hueske. Welcome.
Good to be here.
Yeah, it's good to have you, Brad. And we're really excited because today we're going to talk about vocation. And I have to say, we're going to start with you, Pastor, because I think that's a word that we use a lot around here, talking about vocation, but I'm not really sure that our listeners know what does that mean? How does that apply to me?
Yeah, and so I think a simple way that I like to explain it is vocation is everything you do with your heart, hands, and mind. So it's just what you do as a person. But I think the Christian concept of vocation comes in because it's more than just what I do with my heart, hands, and minds, because I think everybody does that. Right? Whether you do anything, you do things with your hands, hearts, and minds. But I think, I know in Colossians 3:23, it says this: whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord, not for man. And so when we talk about what we do with our hand, heart, and mind, it's not just that I'm doing something for myself or doing something for my company, but I'm actually serving God.
Okay, so Brad, that covers a lot for you because I've seen you here at Peace using your heart, hands, and mind. I've seen you, in your job. I haven't seen you, but you talk a lot about your job and using your hand, hearts, and mind. Talk a little bit about vocation and what that's meant to you.
Well, like Pastor said, it's everything that you do it for the glory of God. We often think of, well, I'm a church worker, so I work for God. But we all are working for God. If we truly follow Jesus' summation of the commands of love God and love others, well, everything we do that is loving to other people is doing God's work.
Yeah. That really brings an interesting challenge because I've been in a group, I'm in a Bible study group, and they're like, well, you're the one doing God's work. And why sometimes do we have that mindset that only people who work in the church are doing God's work?
Well, I've found that the people that I work with who are not church workers, who are, tradesmen, etc., people working in stores, they don't see the work that they're doing as anything special. We see a church worker, somebody, you picture Mother Teresa, right? This person who's sacrificing their whole life to do God's work.
That's so true.
And is living this ascetic life with all these, boils on their skin and stuff even.
Right.
And when you work in a grocery store, you're like, I don't suffer for the work that I do. But I think that people, they separate it out into two different worlds when in reality, everything that we do, if we're doing it out of love for others, is really doing God's work.
Yeah, it's interesting. What just came back to me was during the pandemic, and we only labeled certain people essential workers, right?
Yep.
Only essential workers could go to work. Well, guys, I don't know about you, but my gal that does my hair is essential to me.
Right.
And in this mindset, we're all essential to the kingdom of God.
Exactly. And same story there. My employer at that time, they went around and gave letters to all of the construction workers and said, hey, you guys are all essential workers. And they actually took it so far as they made sweatshirts. They made us these hoodies with essential worker written on the side because they wanted us to understand that if there's nobody there to build the buildings and fix the plumbing and take the trash out, you're just as essential as any other worker is.
Wouldn't it be fantastic we get to heaven and there's a card heart that says essential worker instead of wings?
Yeah, right.
And God's like, well done. Thank you for being a good essential worker.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to talk about vocation too, is that we were created to serve other people and do other things. I think we think about that heaven is this, well, you're going to be floating on the clouds and doing nothing and it'll be so wonderful. And that wasn't the picture of the Garden of Eden, right? God put man and woman in the garden to tend the garden, to take care of it. They were busy working.
He gave them a job.
Yeah.
The first thing God says to man is, here's your job. Do this.
Yeah, right. And so I think, and so I like to think that I'm going to have a job in heaven. It's going to be something with gardening, I'm pretty sure. But like I'll have a job in heaven, right?
Or a ski instructor, right?
Yeah, maybe that.
Okay, so Brad, I want to bring it back around. You come from this really cool position because you're talking about how, it is your vocation is super important, and you do get to be heart, hands, and mind, right? Sure. Work with all that you have. But you've also lived life on the church end of it too.
Yep. I went to college, went to Concordia University, and got a Lutheran teaching degree. Mm-hmm. I was prepped to work in God's house.
Yeah.
Spent years of my life planning for that, and had a wonderful opportunity to get to teach for a couple of years in there. And I tell you what, it was phenomenal. I have a great respect for all of the people in this building who do that every day as a result of my training and preparation for that life.
You were actually my son's teacher, one of his teachers. So I know firsthand what a great teacher you are, and you were in his life. So thank you for that. But which is harder? Is it harder to live it out in the church, or is it harder to live out your vocation outside of the church?
I don't know if I could pick that one is harder than the other. There's different challenges in it. Working in the church every single day. I mean, I was a science teacher, so right there, that automatically doesn't give you a shoe-in for talking about God, but I was working in a Christian school, so I did have a reason every day to talk about God. We did devotions, we did little connections every single lesson. I tried to connect it somehow to something in the Bible or something that we can glean from church fathers or something like that. So it was easier to talk about God because I had an entire staff that was around me reinforcing that. But it was also a little less real. And I don't mean that in like I was faking it as I was talking to the kids about God, but they all know that they're coming to school, going to a Christian school, expecting to get some religion lesson in every single thing they do. Whereas now, by the way, I'm not a teacher anymore. I changed careers, as people do today.
Right.
And I'm now an electrician. I'm a construction worker. I work in a field of a lot of non-Christians, a lot of non-church people. So talking about God is not a natural, normal thing that I do every day, except I do.
So to kind of put it into battlefield language, you kind of were on the back lines supporting the front lines before, helping kind of train our soldiers for the front lines.
Right.
And now you're more on the front lines of kingdom work.
Yeah. I liked to use the analogy when I was teaching that I'm preparing you to face the world, not to go out and attack them,
right,
but to get that defense, that idea of you're learning, here's a big church word, the apologetics, right? You're learning to defend what you believe when other people challenge you. Mm-hmm. And now I'm in the field using that. I have coworkers who question me about my beliefs. They know that I'm a church worker. What are you doing this Saturday? Oh, I'm going to my church and we've got this thing going on. And, hey, by the way, you want to come? And they immediately, oh, no, not church, not for me. I'll burst into flames if I set foot in the church. And I now have to use those same apologetics that I was trying to teach or instill into the students on an everyday basis.
Did you prepare them well?
There's a lot of things that I thought I was using that, this is a great way to fight back. And I find now I've used it once or twice in the field. And I'm like, yeah, that's not an effective way to talk to people.
and truth be told, all of us who work in the church feel that way.
Yeah.
We feel like we've had the most brilliant ideas of how to help you. And no, that was not a good idea.
If you would just do what I tell you to do, everything will be simple.
Right.
Yeah, that's the bubble we live in. And that's why we love having people that are outside. And maybe we need to have you back to talk about, apologetics and that and how you apply that in your sharing of your faith out there at some point.
Okay, so again, we're throwing a term out. apologetics.
Yeah.
So explain a little bit, why is apologetics good? Just real briefly.
Yeah, so I think for me, apologetics is the rational, reasonable ness to my Christianity. And it's not kind of a sword that I attack people with to try and get them convert, but it's a shield that says, no, I've got some reason, there's some reasonableness to my faith. I'm not just kind of blindly following God. I've thought through this, and it's a way that I just kind of back my faith up for myself.
Yeah, the way when I was working with student ministry, the way I would say it to students, when you get to college and you have a roommate that's not a Christian, and they ask you why you are, I don't want you to say, because Donna was cool and we played fun games and the pizza was amazing.
Yeah.
But
Not that that's a bad thing.
No, all those things are great. But to be able to really speak intelligently about their faith, to give words to what they've grown up knowing their entire life.
Yeah, and that's something I discovered because I wasn't originally planning on being a teacher. I went to school to be a engineer of some sort. So I went to 2 years of secular school, of non-Concordia school, and I had my first real deep encounter with non-Christians when I went to college, and I had a roommate who didn't have any idea what Christianity was about, and we had long conversations. I think that was actually very formative for me. Was here? Okay, I went to Christian school all my life. I went to Lutheran high school. I went to all these things that were preparing me. But you never really get to have those deep conversations with Christians because they know exactly where you're coming from for the most part. Mm-hmm. If I want to sit down and talk with Pastor about faith, we're both on the same playing field. Mm-hmm. And we have great conversations, but there's no challenge. It's not a debate. It's just a conversation. Yeah. So getting into a debate with my college roommate where he's going, I don't believe in God. There's no reason for me to believe in God. And I go, well, let me explain my reasons for believing in God.
Right.
It was great.
And debate kind of works in college.
Yeah.
But it doesn't really work in the world, correct?
Right. Like I have coworkers, an apprentice who works with me every day and is there by my side all day long. And if I were to try to debate faith ideas with him, I'm very quickly going to shut him down, and he's just going to not want to be my apprentice anymore.
Yeah.
So it has to be done from a loving standpoint and a really a conversational standpoint.
Yeah, we have somebody in our faith family, and they work at a company here in Denver, and their approach, while they're working, they repair things that are broken, and while they're repairing them, they just ask questions. Mm-hmm. And they've come at it from, what's the question I can ask that can get into that discussion? What do you find is kind of your niche to be able to get the conversation to go there?
Well, being a science teacher, having that background and a love for science, every time we encounter some weird thing in our job, like we're electricians, so electricity gets weird, and my apprentice will ask, hey, can you explain how this works? And I'll dive down the physics rabbit hole, and I've found it's really fun to get them down this physics rabbit hole of explaining something and then just drop in once in a while and isn't that amazing that this world was created with such a deep functional mechanism? And that to me is why I'm a Christian, because I want to know this being that created this.
I love that so much.
Yeah, so I think this is, great conversation on vocation and as a missionary, but I do want to get back to kind of your career vocation here. And so I think you have a really cool story, right? Because you started as, a professional church worker, and then now you're in not professional church work anymore. And there's kind of, you shared with me a cool, I think a challenging conversation, one of your parents of a prior student. And I would love for you to explain that a little bit. So this is kind of to set if I remember right, to set the stage for it, you'd kind of been out of professional church work for a little bit. You're figuring out what you're going to do next. And you had a parent come up and I think share something that was supposed to build you up, but it hurt a little bit, right? Yeah.
So I had some wonderful encounters with great parents of the students I was teaching. I loved that. I had wonderful, supportive, loving, caring parents who reminded me all the time how I was affecting their students and helping their students become good people. And this one parent was such a supportive, loving, uplifting person while I was teaching her son. I taught him for 2 years, and I got to help him gain a love for science that he went on to pursue a career in.
Oh, cool.
And then years later, I'm working at a grocery store, and I run into this person, this mother who is such a wonderful, caring person. She comes up to me and she gives me a hug, and she's so excited to see me. And we start talking, and she asks, like, why aren't you teaching anymore? It's so sad that you're not teaching anymore. And she she starts to go down this pathway of, you have these gifts, and I could really see these gifts. And she's trying to be all uplifting and supportive of me that, hey, you were such a good teacher, and we loved how good you were with our son.
But what's going on in your mind right now as she's talking?
The whole time she's saying this, I'm starting to get a little like, oh no, this isn't good, because I don't feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing. Oh. I'm working at a grocery store. I'm stacking apples on a display. When I went to school for years to get a degree and have this calling. I mean, that's even what they call it in the church. Is
right.
You're a called church worker. And she's expressing her sorrow for me that I'm not teaching anymore. And it made me feel really depressed for a while. I was like, maybe I'm not doing what God meant for me to be doing. If other people see that I have gifts that made me a good teacher, and now I'm stacking apples at the grocery store, am I doing what God meant for me to do?
It's almost like what Henry Blackaby talks about. It's a crisis of faith right there. Like, is my call that I thought God had given me really legit?
Right.
And what am I going to do? So what did you do?
Yeah, and almost like, as you're thinking about that, almost like you're not serving God because you're not a called church worker. Like, that part of your life is done.
Yeah.
I'm failing the kingdom.
Yeah.
I ended my career as a teacher and went to get a job, and I'm sitting in this moment in my life where I'm trying to figure out what I'm doing, stacking apples to make a living. I've got to pay the mortgage, I've got to pay for utilities, I got to buy food, and I'm literally going, maybe this is not what I'm supposed to be doing. Maybe I'm lost. I just felt completely lost because I didn't know how I could use my gifts to serve God, because I'm stacking apples at a grocery store. That's not serving God.
So I just said this a second ago, and I know where the story goes, but where does the story go then? So you're having this crisis of faith.
And this wasn't an overnight. This wasn't an immediate thing. It took me years, and I'm still struggling with it today. It's not something I know what I'm doing now. But after a little time, I kind of looked back at it, and I saw that, okay, I have kids, I have a wife, I have a family that I need to take care of and provide for, and wait a second, I am doing what God commanded me to do. Jesus said, love God and love my people. So if I stack apples at the grocery store, I'm going to make sure that I'm doing a good job at that. I am not stacking apples to make rent, to make the mortgage payment. I'm stacking apples to help people buy high quality food that they're going to nourish their families with. I'm bringing home a paycheck not to pay the utility bill. I'm bringing home a paycheck to provide for my wife and my children and my life. And after years of processing this, I now look at, okay, I work at the airport. I'm an electrician. I build restaurants and wire up lights for a living. How is that work serving God? Well, I'm bringing home a paycheck that provides food for my children. I provide a house that my family lives in. I get to provide for my church. I get to use my skills and abilities to teach Bible classes at church. I get to help build games for our field day that the kids are outside right now getting ready to throw balls at something.
And as somebody who's been through the airport, thank you, because you also keep the trams running and you also do all of those things that we couldn't get to where we needed to go without you.
Exactly. And that's the thing. Like, we're supposed to love God and love his people. So, if I'm installing a fire alarm system, for instance, well, I could just think of it as I'm working a day, putting some pipe up and pulling some wire. Or I can go, I'm serving God by making this facility safe, by helping to keep people safe in a bad situation. Hopefully there's never a big fire at the airport where people are going to have to evacuate. But if they do, the work that I did is serving them and serving God by keeping them safe.
Which gives your life whole different intentionality.
Right.
Right?
Yeah, no, I think when we can look at it as it's not professional church workers who serve God, it's all people who serve God.
Right.
And it goes back to our, front line, back line support workers. Yeah.
Essential.
That we're all essential, that we as church workers, we get to support you and encourage you as people. But as you go out and you're really the ones making a difference in the world. Luther said it this way, because I think this word of vocation that came out of actually the Reformation, right? Around 1517, the Catholic Church was saying the greatest good you can do is you can commit your life to God as a priest, so you're holding up the sacraments, or as a monk or a nun that's literally dedicating your whole life to studying God or worshiping God. And Luther said, no. The person who's serving God the most is the person who's out there loving other people, which goes back to what Jesus said. If you want to love me, feed my sheep. If you want to love me, do things for other people. And so I think we get to serve. Yeah, and that's what you're doing, Brad. You're serving God by wiring electrical systems and smoke detectors and all this.
And still using the gift of teaching that God's given you.
Sure.
You're helping pastor with foundations. You're helping us to really rethink how we're doing some things around here.
And I still get to use that in my job, because I have an apprentice who's working with me every day. I have coworkers who are with me every day. So I can use my teaching, because that's what the parent said. She's like, you have the skills and the gift for teaching and you're not using it. Well, yeah, I am. I use it at work. I teach my coworkers. I teach my apprentice. And I try to give him that ethical, moral background to do the work you're doing for other people. It's not for you. You're bringing home a paycheck, but you're not working for that paycheck. You're working for the other people.
So the majority of listeners, they're listening to us right now, are not church workers. They're you, Brad. So Jesus-Centric leadership, what would you say to them? What would you say to our listeners that you think they really need to hold on to?
I would say leadership doesn't come from the front. The best leader isn't out in the front, marching in front of everyone, carrying the banner. Leadership is done when you pick up the load and carry it with the other people. So, yes, we need those people. We need the banner carriers. We need somebody to show us the way. But that's not the only kind of leader you can have. The one who picks up the load and carries it with you, the one who stands by your side and walks with you, that's the real leader.
I have to tell you, an aside, your dad taught me that same story, except he used a string. I think it was in my first year of ministry here. And he said, you can pull the string, or you can push the string, or you can help guide the string. And when you're pulling it, it's not going to sustain. And I just, I had a flashback to that as you were talking. And praise God for you, Brad, for the work that you're doing, for these conversations, for how you've trusted God in your life to teach you those lessons, and for your family that's always surrounded you and poured into you and your sisters to help you guys to be strong in the kingdom. We're super thankful for that.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I think I'm going to say the verse once more, because I think it sums us up really well. Whatever you do, work heartily as for the Lord and not for men. And that's again from Colossians 3:23.
Do you think we can get essential worker put in the next translation of the Bible?
Maybe. It might need to be. It has a different meaning for us now. Yeah. Yeah, we're all essential to the kingdom.
Amen. I don't think there's a better place to end but there. Thank you so much for joining us. Brad, we want to thank you, and we hope that you'll join us for the next Jesus-Centric Leadership.